You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name and politics is our game. And we will be doing politics this evening because we have as our guest State Representative Julie Hamos, who of course is running in the 10th Congressional District Democratic primary. She would like to be the next congressperson from the 10th Congressional District. We'll talk more about that district in detail as we get into the show, but very briefly, it starts in Wilmette and then goes up through Kenilworth and Winnetka and Glencoe and Highland Park and up to almost to the border of Wisconsin, out to the northwest suburbs. It's the North Shore and beyond, you might say, in northwest suburbs. Fairly affluent district. Mark Kirk is the current incumbent congressman. He has held that since 2000. Prior to that, it was John Porter who held, Republican John Porter, who held that for 21 seats. So the 21 years, excuse me, so the Republicans have had the 10th Congressional District for now about 3 decades, right?
Daunting.
It's daunting. It's a daunting task,
Yeah.
And it is a Democratic district. It has went big time for Barack Obama. I think 61%
That's
against
right.
McCain.
Yep.
In 08 and in 04 went for John Kerry by a more modest margin, 53% to 47%. There will be Julie Hamos has competition. We'll talk about that more as we get into the show. In the Democratic primary, she will have some competition if she wins that primary and gets to the general election from Republicans. But one thing to note, Julie Hamos is here. Dan Seals could have been here. He could have been here over 3 years. He doesn't have time for the show. He's your opponent, one of our major opponents in the Democratic primary. Bill Cadigan, who's been rumored to be running, and he said he's going to be running on the Republican side, could have been here a few weeks ago, but he's waiting until he announces. The other Republicans don't respond to my calls. So we can't endorse candidates. We don't endorse candidates. But what we do endorse is everybody running for public office should do what Julie Hamos has done time and again as state rep. She's been a state rep for 11 years, and I think most of those years you've come out twice, 2 times a year, right?
At least, yeah.
At least. She's our go-to candidate. She is the first of many candidates that are going to be running in the Democratic and Republican primaries in the 10th Congressional District. And so we'll start off right with what Julie Hamos is so comfortable with, the issues. So let me ask you, right, point blank, let's get into foreign policy. We'll go back to domestic policy. No
Really?
Transitions on this show.
No transitions.
Look, this question might sound familiar to you. We'll talk about it. But the question was, and it was asked publicly of somebody, we'll talk about who, a few years back in 2004. And the question was, well, actually in 2005 or 2006, but it's still the same. If there were a conflict between Israel and Iran, where would you come down? State Representative Julie Hamos, running for Congress, 10th Congressional District, Democratic primary.
A conflict between Israel and Iran? I think there's a conflict right now.
And where do you come down?
You know, I think that Iran is one of the most important issues facing us, and certainly facing Israel, but not only Israel, facing the stability of the Middle East and the rest of the world. And I think we, Americans, need to take very seriously the fact that Iran is developing nuclear capability, and we need to be right in there on that issue. So it's not a conflict. We hope not. We hope it won't be. But it certainly is something that we need to pay attention to. And I'm saying that on behalf of Israel, because I'm passionate about Israel, but I'm also saying that because it impacts all of us.
And if the conflict escalated, I think this was the vein in which the question was asked, if the conflict escalated and there was a real military conflict, we'll talk about what form it took, between Iran and Israel. Julie Hamos, if you were in the Congress and you were asked to vote on that, you were asked to give guidance to the president, where should he come down on this conflict between Israel and Iran? What's your answer? It should be it's a no trick question.
Jeff, I think
I'll tell you the answer that somebody else gave.
I think it's a very unusual answer, a question, because I mean, Israel is a beacon of democracy in the Middle East. So of course I would support the democratic country in that region.
Of course you would support Israel.
And of course I would support Israel. Yeah. But it's hard to think through a hypothetical like that, because I think if there was really a conflict with Iran, I think the rest of the world would be engaged. And it wouldn't just impact Israel. That's what I'm saying. Your
rival, and we try to be fair, and if he were here, we'd give him a chance to answer that question again. But your rival, Dan Seals, was asked that question in 2005 or 6 by Lee Goodman. Seals wouldn't come on this show. He still would be fair to him if he'd come on. But he was interviewed by Lee Goodman, and I guess he thought that'd be a friendlier interview. Lee, as people might remember, ran for Congress in 2004 in the 10th Congressional District, okay? Was the nominee. And the answer Seals gave was he'd come down on the side of peace. Is that a good answer? Do you differ with Seals?
Well, ultimately, I think we need to get to peace. But I am standing on the side of Israel when they are facing a very formidable foe in Iran. And Iran right now is the #1 issue that I think Israelis are thinking about. And that's something we don't talk a lot about. We've watched this democracy playing out now as part of their election. But I think we need to redouble our attention on what Iran is doing with their nuclear capability that will impact all of us.
Now, we know what they're doing, and we know the various talks have not worked in terms of discussions to leverage other countries, leverage the United States, to get Iran to back off from developing a nuclear capability. It's probably very close. Most would say probably within a year, perhaps less. Would you agree? Is that sort of the intelligence we pick up publicly?
I think that there are sanctions that are being considered right now.
But do you think they'll work? It seems like Iran says they don't really care about sanctions, isn't that the impression you get?
Well, I don't think that we have played that hand yet. And I think there are sanctions that they're working on right now, both the United States, we hope a whole international community along with Israel, and they are looking at sanctions that I hope will work because we ultimately want them to work.
Give me one. What would work?
Well, I think their gasoline supply is something, they have oil, but they don't have gasoline supply. And I think they don't have refining capacity. So I think that there's possibilities there to try to bring in the international business community, the corporations that do business in Iran, and try to engage them in this conversation about sanctions.
A blockade of Iran?
You know what? I'm not going to delve into foreign policy as a 3-week-old congressional candidate, but I think there are some issues here, and they're very important. And it's interesting to me that you jumped right into Iran, because I think it is that serious, and I think we do need to pay attention to Iran.
It's been simmering. It seemed to be simmering a lot as the Bush administration was leaving. Right. There were a lot of rumors that maybe Israel would act on its own to take out the nuclear capability because the Bush administration might be more friendly to that response than an Obama administration. It didn't happen. And it kind of went away, that discussion. But you're saying it may come back soon. Not specifically that action, but just that topic.
Not that action, but I'm hoping there will be an international response to Iran.
All right, we're going to go back and forth on this show between domestic policy, foreign policy, maybe a little state policy. Julie Hamos is ambidextrous, whatever the word is for being able to handle domestic policy, foreign policy, cultural policy, and state policy.
There must be a name for that, yeah.
She has broad-based knowledge. And again, she's not afraid to come on the show. Look, I don't say there's a cause and effect, but Barack Obama, as our regular viewers would know, came on in the short space of 3.5 years from 2001 to 2004, 5 times, maybe 6. We got 5 tapes. I'm still looking for the 6th.
And Jeff, the reason is because I really do believe in democracy, small d. I think this is presenting ourselves to the voters is all about educating them, having them see us close up, really having a chance for them to review us in an unstructured kind of setting like this, when we're not doing our little 30-second sound bites, our little direct mail pieces. Yes, I'll be doing that too. But I think this is a more genuine way for our voters to evaluate us. And I like that I'd like to present that as an opportunity for voters, and I believe in it.
And that's kind of what Obama said, because when he differentiated
he probably
himself...
said it way more eloquently than I.
No, you're close. You should talk. You know Barack.
Yes,
you worked hard to elect Barack.
I was one of his first supporters up here.
You were big in getting him the nomination.
The United States Senate.
Right,
yes.
In that Democratic primary. He swept New Trier Township and the surrounding areas because of you, and also because of Jan Schakowsky. You two worked very hard on that,
That's right?
And it was like there was no competition.
But it was all about bringing him into people's living rooms, giving them an opportunity to see him close up. I'm trying to do the same kind of thing. To me, house parties are the essence of this democracy, grassroots campaigns, which really allow people to judge me, to size me up when they're seeing me close up. And I like that, and that's what you're doing too.
So let's go over to the economy.
Yes.
The $700 billion bailout. If you had been in Congress in the fall of 2008, and President Bush asked, as he did, for a $700 billion bailout of the financial sector, the banks. Fed Chairman Bernanke supported that. Then Treasury Secretary Paulson supported that. I think then Speaker Pelosi supported that, and other key Democrats. Would you have gone along with that $700 billion bailout of the financial sector?
Well, the first thing I would say is that what I will do as Congresswoman is what I have always done as state legislator, which is I really evaluate all the evidence, all the information. I read reports, I look at research, and I wasn't part of that solution. So it's a little hard for me to just jump right into it and say, sure, why not? But in retrospect, I think it's the only thing that was presented. And it was the economy was in a free fall. It was a very frightening kind of time. And there was nothing else that was on the table. And I suspect that based on that, when you evaluate the fact that there was an approach that really had bipartisan support that was being presented in a very logical way, I probably would have supported it, sure. But I also want to always add that hypotheticals are a little challenging for me because I do consider myself to be a policy thinker, which means I want to evaluate all the information in front of me, and I'm not going to just take knee-jerk kind of responses to issues.
You consider yourself an independent, or you just consider yourself a regular organization, true blue Democrat?
No regular organization person has ever wanted me, so I probably am not that.
Speaker Mike Madigan? You didn't have good relations with Speaker Mike?
You know, I like to say this. I went to Springfield 11 years ago because I cared deeply about good public policy. And when it's being handled well, and Speaker Madigan was at my side when we saved the transit system together. That was a very important effort. We had to do it. Well, he supported me, and I supported what he was bringing. I learned a lot. We did CTA pension reform that nobody had ever done in Illinois. I really supported that. So we worked very well together. We work closely together. When he does things I don't like, then I speak out. Does that make me an independent? I think so.
But you do say, your slogan, I've heard this before, is you find a way to yes. Is that right?
That's it.
What does that mean?
That means I try to look for ways that we can build consensus around problems of the day. And it means building coalition. It means hearing both sides. It means willing to be bipartisan in my approach to public policy. That's what I have done really for 30 years. And as a result of that, I have a good track record of leadership on some key issues of the day.
Is Barack Obama, President Obama, you talked about building coalitions, finding a way to yes, maybe you could advise him on this. Is he finding a way to build a coalition within the Democratic Party to get approval of the health care proposal coming out of the Democratic Party? Because as you know, he's got a filibuster-proof Senate. He's got, I don't know, is it a margin in the House of 50 to 60 seats, something like that?
Yep.
In other words, he really doesn't need Republicans to pass this if he could get his Democrats in the Senate and the House to support health care reform that he's proposing, and yet he can't seem to do it, or is it that he doesn't want to do it without some Republican support?
Oh my goodness, this is such a big, I'm watching this so closely.
You got 30 seconds to answer that question.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, is that all we have left?
No, we've got plenty of time.
I think I'm worried that the Democrats seem to want to do it alone. I mean, they don't want to, but they're so intent on getting something passed that they seem willing to do it just as a Democratic plan. Right now, I worry, listening very closely to the constituents in the 10th District, I don't know that there's that much public support for health care reform. People don't understand it. And it's not just because of the misinformation and all the town hall meetings and name calling back and forth. It's not just that. It's that a concrete plan has not yet been presented that the American people could really resonate to.
And whose fault is that? Is that Barack Obama's fault? He's the president.
I think, well, you know, I think that the president has decided this would be a congressional project. And I don't think that Congress has presented this well yet to the American people.
Should he take it back and articulate the message as only he can?
I think they're going to, after the August recess, have to distill this down to the most important parts and try to present something logical to the people so that people will understand what the issues are.
Is having a public option, is that key to you, that people, when they buy insurance, have the choices that they have now, which is in the private sector, but also have a so-called public option? This would be, I guess, a government-run insurance scheme, insurance plan.
Well, when you call it insurance scheme.
Yeah, that's. I'm sorry. I didn't mean I didn't mean to color it in that way. But I meant it's schematic. A government-run program to provide insurance to compete with private insurers, perhaps similar to Medicare. Isn't that what the public option is? And if not, tell me.
So I am again approaching this in a slightly different way because I do want us to get to yes somehow at the end of this process. And when I have started to sort of step back as a newcomer, it's easy to do this. I'm stepping back and saying, what problem are we trying to solve? You know, again, if it's true that 85% of the American public already has health insurance and is satisfied with it, that's not the issue. So what problem are we trying to solve? And here's what I would say. I have learned over the years that I have been a state legislator that the biggest problem we have for health insurance is in the 50-year-old to pre-Medicare group. So the 50 to 65-year-olds have a very tough time buying health insurance if they lost a job, if they're self-employed, or if they want to change jobs, and they're scared to death. Why is that? Because of pre-existing conditions.
So it either becomes
by definition, older people have a hard time buying health insurance.
We have a program in the state that handles that somewhat called iChip. Does that handle that?
Well,
because pre-existing conditions don't
but
knock you out, but it's very expensive.
But that's for catastrophic health care. Catastrophic. Yeah. So we have a problem. That is the problem I think we should try to solve.
That is actually, iChip covers you health care in general. It's just very expensive because it focuses on people
and it runs out of money.
Conditions.
It's deeply subsidized. Okay. That is a public option, actually.
Okay. That is a public option.
That's an example of a public option. So let me just very quickly say that if we start out with that as the problem, then how do we get to 50 to 65? How do we get to a logical result? Okay. Well, we could say that insurance companies can discriminate based on pre-existing, but if we do that, then what's to prevent them from raising the rates, making it even harder? And what's to prevent people from waiting until they get sick, right? And then buying the health insurance. Right. That's not a good result. So I think we should distill this down. I mean, in today's Tribune editorial, it said we should look at requiring everybody to buy health insurance. That way we spread the costs all the way through.
Avoid the free riders who don't buy when they're young.
It's not the free riders.
But they don't buy when they're young and then they want it when they're older.
The healthy with the sick, that's what a health insurance plan should be about, right? Of course, prohibiting insurance companies from discriminating. So I think we can distill this down to just a few issues. And if at the end of that, maybe we should regulate the rates of insurance companies or have a public option. Well,
wouldn't that invite people to talk about a socialist economy?
You know what? No, because I think the concern we should have is about health insurance rates going even higher if we allow everybody to buy it.
Is a small sector
if we buy everybody to buy it and people are waiting until they're sick.
If you require everybody to buy it.
No. Okay. If we allow people to have access to it, but they're waiting until they're sick, and the insurance companies can't say no, can't deny, then we have a problem with rates. So what do we do about the rate, how high the rates are going?
But would you just regulate it for that sector of the 50 to 65
I think
range?
The public option,
it's not going to affect
let
the 20
me just say
to 30?
This, whether we call it a public option or a not-for-profit option or another option, then what a high rate public, a very expensive health insurance plan, then people might want a choice. And that's where the choice question comes in. So I think, again, logical people sitting around a table could really come down to just a few components that are true healthcare reform that I think we should do. And a public option may or may not fit into that. And I think it feels like it fits because I worry that if we're going to allow people to buy health insurance and they don't have that kind of option, then they're only going to be given the option of very expensive health insurance.
So for you, is a public option essential?
No, I don't start that way. Okay. I start by looking at a total program to see how we achieve a result. And the result, and I think the problem I've identified is valid, it's real, it's about something that people can resonate to and understand. I think we should have health insurance companies tell us how we get there. How do we insure that group?
So you're open
I'd like to ask my health insurance contacts, and I'm going to, how do we achieve that result?
Okay, so you're open,
what would it take?
You're open to other options to the public option?
Yeah, I would be, sure.
Even though Speaker Pelosi said she couldn't pass up legislation in the House unless it had a public option.
I am the kind of person who would look at the overall comprehensive package. And I'm not one of those people that says it's either this or that. I don't think of the world that way. I have to say that one of my successes over the years has been I see shades of gray. I don't start out by saying it's black and white, and this has to be this or that. I really understand shades of gray, and I come up with comprehensive solutions to problems. That's what I think this demands.
Yeah, the healthcare or the health sector portion of the economy is said to be about 15 to 16% of the economy. But as we tape this show on August 23rd, people will see it late August, early September, unless they see it on YouTube. And remember, you can see all these shows all the time. Don't have to wait till it's airing on cable. You can find it by going to youtube.com/user/Public Affairs TV. I'll show that once or twice during the show so you get a chance to write it down. And you can watch Julie Hamos and watch her old shows and many others.
Often put these on my own website.
And which is?
Because I do juliehamos.org. One word, juliehamos.org.
Multiple chances to watch Julie Hamos, Jeff Berkowitz. Again, we don't endorse anybody, But we do endorse what Julie Hamos, State Representative Julie Hamos, is doing, coming here and talking about the issues.
And I think if we're talking about healthcare reform, the most important goal has to be to do no harm. We cannot take away from the people who already have health insurance, who already have health care, and they are satisfied with it. And I think that has to be sort of a baseline for all of this.
The other portion, the other 85% of the economy, seems to be in problems. There was an $800 billion stimulus program of President Obama earlier in the year. He said that was needed to prevent unemployment from going above 8% nationally. It's now at 9.4%. It's 10.3% in Illinois. Does that tell you, well, one, would you have supported that stimulus if you had been in Congress? And two, do you think it's not working?
You know, I think there are other indicators that show that the economy is kind of on the rebound. So those are very promising. We do have our economic advisors coming on TV now every few days, it seems to me, to show us that things are moving in the right direction.
Housing sales are up, but retail sales are down.
Housing sales are a great indicator of that, and I see that all the time here in the 10th district.
But unemployment's gone higher than Obama said.
Unemployment is still a concern, obviously. Would I have supported the stimulus package? I guess, again, I want to see what was fully laid out at that time. What I'm worried about is
what would you have done, yes or no, and then you can explain.
I suspect I would have supported that, okay. But I am very aware of that money being spent wisely. And at the state level, for example, I just made a phone call. I work on energy efficiency. That stimulus plan was giving us a lot of energy efficiency money, over $100 million. I am staying on top of our energy efficiency people in Springfield to make sure that we have a plan for putting that forward. That's reasonable, that's wise, and that it's not going to get squandered. That, I think, is the trickle-down aspect of this. At the state level now, we have to make sure that that much money is being spent wisely.
Now, the Republicans say there should have been tax cuts that would have put cash in hand in consumers quicker, would have been a quicker stimulus. They say 10 to 15% of the stimulus money is being spent in the first year. Do a tax cut, not a small rebate, but a significant tax cut to high-income people as well as low-income people. You get businesses being invested in, people work, save, and invest, you get a quicker response. So one, do you disagree with that? And is it still too late to say maybe the stimulus wasn't working, maybe we should make sure the Bush tax cuts don't expire in 2010 because that's going to be a tax increase?
Well, I think there's so many issues on the table right now.
But it's just the tax cut issue.
We probably cannot afford another tax cut at this time.
Could we afford to say,
I don't know
don't let the tax cuts expire?
I don't know that.
You'd be open to maybe keeping those Bush tax cuts in force?
Well, but again, I think we're trying to look at possible funding mechanisms for other important goals, like healthcare reform. So I don't, those two were linked in candidate Obama's mind, right? So I don't know how we're going to be next year. I mean, right now, I think the idea of another tax cut right on the heels of the big economic stimulus plan, I don't know that we can afford that. We don't want to add to the deficit at this point.
Warren Buffett, who is an advisor and supporter of Barack Obama, says there's been too much spending. He's trying to signal to Obama he should cut back, maybe on healthcare, maybe on energy, something for less spending by the federal government at this time. As we tape this show, a day before the CBO, Congressional Budget Office, revised its estimates for the next decade of deficits from $7 trillion to $9 trillion.
I know.
So with that kind of news, do you think, is Buffett right? Should Obama start looking to cut back on the growth of spending?
I believe he should. Okay. And I will say this to you. I think that as I'd like to think thoughtful policymaker, which is what I have tried always to be and what I would do as a congresswoman. I will be very mindful of those deficits. I have a long-term view of how our state is doing, how our country is doing. And if you have a long-term view, you have to be mindful of deficits. And I feel like I will be paying a lot of attention to the budget, how money's being spent, how it's coming down to the state, not just the more the better, but if it's being spent wisely. And I will be paying real close attention to how much our deficits are increasing.
And maybe cut back on the spending in the energy area, in the healthcare area, if it's necessary to keep those deficits lower?
I think that this conversation started with you asking, should we do more? And I would be very concerned about doing that. Adding to the deficit right now, I think would be a big problem. So I think we have to see how this works. We have the money the money's out there for the economic stimulus plan. I don't think there's any way to take that back. And it's going to be an 18-month program. It's only been a few months, relatively speaking, 5 months. It's an 18-month program. Let's see how it's working. By all indicators, the economy is coming back. But in the future, I think we really have to pay attention to that deficit.
Talking about doing less, should this government be doing less in Afghanistan? Obama has doubled the number of troops to 61,000. There are rumors and suggestions that in the next month or two he may get a recommendation to increase the number of troops in Afghanistan by 15,000 additional troops, maybe 45,000. What's your advice to Barack Obama if you were in Congress? Would you say, maybe we shouldn't be doing so much in Afghanistan? Or, as he said, it's the good war, it's the necessary war. This is different from Iraq. This has to be pursued.
No, I would quote to him something that he himself said just a few months ago, which is that we need an exit strategy in Afghanistan, and this cannot be a perpetual drift. And that's what I believe. So if we have a way to engage the local military and the local security forces, that's what this should all be about. Supposedly, the generals are telling us we learned a lot from Iraq. We can do this in a much more strategic and effective way, but we need an exit strategy, and I would not want to see us there 3 years from now, 4 years from now. I really
You
would
want to see all the troops out of Afghanistan in 3 to 4 years?
I would like to see an exit strategy that makes sense, and I think we should be focused on exits at the same time that we're sending more troops in.
Some might say if you leave there, it's going to become a safe haven for the Taliban as it was when 9/11 occurred. So are you worried about that you may have the same group evolving that attacked the United States on September 11th if you leave Afghanistan?
Of course I am, and I'm worried.
So should we have an exit
You know what,
strategy?
we're not supposedly there because of the Taliban, as awful as they are. We are supposedly there because they harbor the Al-Qaeda. So does Pakistan, and they're our allies. So we have to be a little bit mindful of just going into these countries without an exit strategy. That's all I'm saying. It's what I said in Iraq. It's what Obama said about Iraq. I'd like to think that the same principles apply now and that we don't see this as a long-term engagement.
We're going to continue to speak as the credits roll, but I very much want to thank our guest, State Representative Julie Hamos, who is running in the 10th Congressional District Democratic primary. She faces competition from Dan Seals, who we'd hope would come here and discuss the issues in the same way Representative Hamos has. She faces competition from Elliot Richardson, who we'll try to have on. We haven't contacted him. And eventually, if she wins, she faces competition in the general election. And we didn't mention State Representative Beth Carlson may also be running in the Republican primary.
Right.
Could be Carlson be Hamos or Hamos be Carlson.
Right.
And very quickly, what's that 10th Congressional District look like? Tell the viewers. In terms of geographically.
Well, it starts in Wilmette and goes north along the lake all the way to Waukegan, and then as far west as Lincolnshire, Buffalo Grove. It's a very large north suburban district.
All right. Again, we don't endorse candidates, but we do endorse every candidate doing what State Representative Hamos has done. Come on Public Affairs, discuss the issues. Abortion. Would you favor parental notice?
I do. No, I don't favor
you
parental
don't favor
notice,
parental
and
notice.
I have not stood for
You're
that.
100% pro-choice.
I am.
Guns, strong believer in gun control?
Yes, I am.
Same-sex marriage?
I have not supported same-sex marriage, but I am a co-sponsor of the civil union bill in Springfield.
Why not same-sex marriage? Or let me go to something that would come up in Congress. Don't ask, don't tell. Would you like to see that repealed?
Yes, I do.
Immediately, right now.
Well,
Is Obama dragging his feet on that one?
Well, I'd like to make that a high priority for the country, sure.
You believe in the Second Amendment? Do people have a right to own guns?
I think the United States Supreme Court has told us that they do.
And you back that up?
I think that's what our Constitution says, and I back up the United States Supreme Court.
When you were running...
I think what I have been supporting, when we talk about gun control, we talk about sensible, reasonable gun regulation.